Mike Bloomberg supporters. Why? I'm paid to make memes. Bloomberg associate. Alright, so you beavers and buttholes, what are your qualifications? Beavers and buttholes. I have 8443 karma. Bloomberg associate. Fuck, he's good. You're hired. Edit. Karma count. Wait, does karma count matter? I'd like to cash in, please. You've got a long way to go. I heard once you get 500k you can cash in for a snoo-themed toaster. I promised at the beginning of the year I would only vote for the candidate whose ads I see most often on YouTube. Bloomberg Raid 2020. Did somebody say games? I love playing Raid. Shadow Legends. Raid. Shadow Legends is a free-to-play mobile game. I'm sorry I couldn't help but hear you chaps talking about Raid. Shadow Legends. A free-to-play mobile game which I also love. Oh, are we talking about Raid? Shadow Legends. A free-to-play mobile game which I love to play. Without a serious tag, this is going to be a fun thread. I want to read a version of this with a serious tag, but this shit is hilarious. Wait, what's a serious tag? The TV was saying such nice things about him. Why wouldn't someone vote for him? He's running as a Democratic but was a conservative for a long time, promotes conservative ideologies, and was responsible for racist policies like stop and frisk. For more information. Regardless of whether he calls himself a Democrat or conservative, he's neither really. He's a dyed-in-the-wool authoritarian. He cherry-picks from both ideologies to build a foundation around controlling everyone and everything. Yeah, he extended his mayoral term limits against the wishes of a majority of New York residents. He referred to the NYPD as his own army. Imagine what he'd do in charge of the entire country. Sweats nervously. Someone should probably inform the Bloomberg campaign about this thread so they can contract some supporters to come over and post. They already have. In fact, they posted it to find weak points to analyze. Edit. Oh, the obituary, thank you for the gold. As a foreigner with absolutely no say in the election, I find this award just a little bit sweeter. Maybe Bloomberg will hire me now that I'm famous and I can prove my effectiveness for his campaign. This thread is market research LOL. Someone is getting paid to read my shit posts right now, and I love it. We should just start dropping Sonic the Hedgehog erotic fanfiction excerpts into the comments. Still not voting for Bloomberg. Edit. I was given an award, so I shall award you all with a Sonic the Hedgehog erotic fanfiction excerpt. Sorry, not sorry. Sonic, that's too much. Panic Tails, his voice rising to a shrill tempo like a cymbal struck too many times by a child, careless of the sound it makes, or the rhythm of proper instrumentation. Gotta go fast. Roared Sonic as he upped the momentum. Today's activities were no friend to Newton's third law of motion. From the bushes, Abraham Lincoln watched, and when he realized the growing need within his own heart, he knew that the future was a strange and exciting place. Indeed. My support is contingent upon his position on Sonic the Hedgehog erotic fan fiction. Is he a Knuckles guy? A Tails guy? A Knuckles deep guy? I hope MSNBC asks the hard questions. I get the feeling he'd be a stop and frisk Shadow guy. Would they give Shadow a gun? Sega, what are you doing? Give Sonic a gun too. Such blue supremacy, SMH my head. The real hashtag Blue Lives Matter. You'd probably have better luck asking this on Facebook. Just sort by controversial. What have you done? I'm going in. You'll find a lot of bullshit, but a refreshing amount of policy discussion and sub-comments down there. I prefer it TBH. It's not complicated. Bloomberg is the neoliberal candidate. Biden was, but his campaign choked, and Bloomberg is the next best bet. Bernie and Trump are both populists of differing stripes, and both are risky in different ways to the wealthy. Trump has wealthy supporters, mostly along ideological lines, but most wealthy folks aren't red hats. If you're a middle to upper class voter with real assets, or an oligarch, you probably care more about returning to a business as usual that'll protect your class interests, as opposed to making America great again or Medicare for all. Warren is a compromise candidate that isn't left enough to appeal to Bernie's base, but has shifted close enough to him to alienate Clinton voters, who mostly voted for her not because she's a woman, but because she's gold standard, bankable, neoliberal royalty. The other Democrats aren't serious contenders, except Buttigieg, who is gunning for the same neoliberal ticket Bloomberg is after, but is less qualified. Not that folks are thinking of it this way, there's political, institutional, and cultural inertia at play. A lot of neoliberal candidates enjoy popularity basically because they seem sensible and reliable. No surprise, this has been the dominant narrative for a long time. If two among Biden, Bloomberg, and Buttigieg were to drop out and endorse the last, that candidate would surely beat Bernie and Trump. They all know this. Yet, each one thinks they can be that guy, none of them want to drop out. So, Bernie's surging ahead. The longer they wait, the more realistic Bernie's campaign seems to mainstream. None of them want to drop out before Super Tuesday, though, because they think this is the moment that'll distinguish them as the anointed one. But this is a dangerous game. If Bernie does better than the best of the three, it might be too late, even with help from the DNC and the media, which actually erodes faith in the neoliberal establishment and pushes voters towards populist candidates. It's interesting to watch it unfold, but the outcome isn't really important when it comes to the rise and fall of these ideological forces. Trump's presidency has already confirmed right-wing populism as a political force in America, doesn't matter if he gets a second term. Bernie's campaign has already done well enough to posit left-wing populism as a genuine alternative, even if it gets squashed, and if he gets in, he'll be obstructed, and that won't harm his premise. And neoliberalism? Well, that's a fractured and dying ideology worldwide, regardless if a moneyed oligarch swoops in and nabs the US presidency. There's no going back to the 90s. We can only go forward. The dynamics you're describing in these primaries sound similar to what happened with Trump in 2016. He was a populist candidate who was slow to win over his establishment. Fox News disliked him, but he led in polls, while other more traditional candidates were splitting up voters. Eventually his competition dropped out one by one, but rather than the remaining competitors consolidating voters, Trump had become more accepted by media and pulled away further. In this case, Bernie could be Trump. Even though this is Bernie's second time around, he seems to be benefiting from the circumstances that allowed Trump to win. Most of the Bloomberg supporters I know are 1. Former Republicans or independents who despise Donald Trump. 2. Democrats who despise Bernie. 3. Democrats who have resigned themselves to thinking he'll win the nomination because that's how the world works now, and he's better than Trump. My social group is entirely comprised of white college-educated urban professionals in their 30s. So to put it politely, the racial issues surrounding Bloomberg aren't really a concern for them. The 2 older ladies in my office told me they're number 3 just this morning. Because the 1 minute long ads keep telling me T. I always get sad when I see someone stroke out right in front of me on Reddit. That was where the skip ad button became available. Bloomberg had him until then. I actually willingly gave YouTube money for premium purely so I can stop seeing his fucking ads constantly on my Apple TV. I use an ad block on PC. This ain't a presidential campaign, it's a YouTube marketing campaign. Also remember he has said he's got $2 billion to run on. If Bernie wins and gets his net worth tax in place, he'll be taxed over $3 billion. So when he loses bad, then doubles down, it's cause he doesn't care if he wins, he just needs to split the vote, so Bernie doesn't. The problem with that is Bloomberg is splitting the moderate vote. There's like 4 moderates splitting the moderate vote, and only Warren and Bernie splitting the progressive vote, so it's hard to see how vote splitting wouldn't be beneficial to Bernie. Because he just needs enough market share to completely split off a faction of the party as a new independent party. Just enough is required to tilt the scales and ensure he remains untaxed. Because as Americans, what we really want in an election is a former Democrat running as a Republican against a former Republican running as a Democrat. Both as arrogant as can be, but claiming to concerned about the little guy. Both with baggage that should sink any presidential hopeful. Such a time to be an American. Remember when people said Romney was too rich to be a good president? They also said Romney wasn't a good person because he was mean in high school. Boy, we got what we deserved on the rudeness front. I remember the outrage when he said he put his dog in his crate on the roof of his car and drove like that. Simpler times, really. Because he offered me $250. On the subject of spending Bloomberg's money, there's a site that lets you spend Bill Gates' money just to get a sense of how rich he is. Now, Gates is a bit richer than Bloomberg. Gates is worth about $90 billion, Bloomberg only about $60 billion. But, for most stuff, that doesn't matter. If you go to that site, you can click a button to see what impact it would have to buy a Super Bowl ad, or buy a cruise liner, or buy a 747. If you do that, you see just how little something like a Super Bowl ad, or even a whole presidential run, costs to someone as rich as Bloomberg. I appreciate that the site didn't let me buy 10 Mona Lisas, but it was still jarring when there was something I couldn't buy with that amount of money. If he offered each voter $250, he would end up spending $16,250 million on 65 million votes to be elected a president. Which he could do and still have $30 billion left. Jesus Christ, we are also fucked LMAO. You're telling me this fuck has damn near $50 billion? No. Definitely nowhere near $50 billion. Higher. As of November 2019, Bloomberg was the 12th richest person in the world, with a net worth estimated at $61.8 billion. So, to clarify, we're living in a world where the former mayor of New York City is paying struggling millennials, teenagers and a man called Shithead Steve to make him look old and out of touch in an attempt to win the Democratic nomination to be the president and commander-in-chief of the United States of America, following on from that guy from The Apprentice who may have made his way into the White House on the back of a cartoon frog. Hold on to your butts, boys and girls. This is going to be a weird election cycle. This might be the single greatest TLDR I've ever read on Reddit. The sad thing is the soul of America is being bought out for such a small amount of money from people who don't even realize or care what they're selling. Our media-saturated culture has killed consensus reality. All that's left is spectacle. I wish people were more aware of astroturfing and how insidious it is. Reddit is drenched in it. If you think your political candidates are free of it and pure, think again. The big wake-up is that almost all viral content, political or not, is engineered. See Jimmy Kimmel. And Baby Yoda and Tide Pods and Raid Shadow Legends and Bernie Sanders and the list goes on and on. Don't you dare point it out, though. Everyone will sit here in this thread and nod their heads along to what you're all saying, and then immediately buy back into the bullshit by upvoting memes designed to sell a product or person. It's all so dumb. He's the lesser of two evils. I'm looking forward to Bezos 2024 where he just skips the charade and outright buys America. What's stopping him from buying it right now? He's preoccupied with building his third secret volcano lair. I need a lair. Oh man, don't go with the volcano lair though. The upkeep is murder, literally. Sacrificial virgins so it doesn't erupt. I'm a simple man, I see 37 YouTube ads in a day, and my mind is effectively changed. Edit. Jesus Christ Reddit, I know what the fuck ad block is, I leave YouTube on in the background on my work computer where I cannot have ad block. We laugh, but it works. People who mostly avoid politics get a YouTube or radio or TV ad making what seems like a reasonable case for a candidate, and lacking anything that disagrees with it, it makes an impact. Cosign. In 2000 I was a young reporter helping cover election day. The big Bush ad in my area was the one that said Al Gore thinks he invested the internet. The big Gore ad said Bush's economic plan just didn't add up. Almost everyone I interviewed quoted one of those ads to explain who they were voting for. The dumb ads really do work. No wonder Bloomberg doesn't register with anyone under 40. We don't have cable and we know how to install an ad blocker. This comment surprisingly hit home. I had heard about a large ad campaign he put on, but I haven't seen or heard a single one. It's ironic that ad blockers would be part of his undoing, seeing as they basically stop and frisk incoming content to check if it's advertising. Got him. Not me, but my aunt and uncle. Basically, after she was done explaining that they hide their incomes which are very high so as to avoid paying the actual amount of taxes they should, etc., she told me he was gonna be their guy. Because that. Funniest part was I had just finished saying I basically paid a lot of money for health insurance and in taxes because I freelance. And she somehow thought that me, a poor person, actually paying my taxes, was absurd and I should somehow agree with and be proud of their cunning. My family hates them. My calculus teacher in high school said, tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance is everybody's God-given duty. He advocated to try to get as many deductions as possible. Didn't hide income. You know, you could alert the IRS of their tax evasion scheme. Plus, you can get 15% to 30% of the taxes collected as a reward if you report tax fraud. Only in cases of large-scale fraud where actionable evidence is provided. Not just random tips. That's why I said taxes collected. Only applies if the IRS is actually able to recover the taxes not paid. If they can't collect, you don't get anything. This election, we may have a New York billionaire business mogul in his 70s who has enacted racist policies, made sexist comments, and switched political parties for convenience versus Donald Trump. So when the Dems run Bloomberg and lose, do they forfeit the right to oppose racist, sexist, democracy-corrupting billionaires? They certainly lose the right to whine about rich people. They should have disallowed him running as a Dem the second he avoided all of the debates. We whittled down 14 candidates, and then this chicken shit billionaire hops up and says, LOL but money, avoids a couple caucuses, and is still allowed at the next debate. What the fuck are rules even for? Not defending his perspective, but I think I can offer at least some insight into the mind of one Bloomberg supporter I know, my dad. My dad, through the mid-2000s or so, identified as a Republican. But he was definitely on the more moderate side of that spectrum, conservative about economics, but anti-war, pro-environmental protections, and a leave people alone mentality on social issues. He doesn't like talking about politics, but he pays attention. He didn't like it when politicians later made outrageous claims, but would respect one if they seemed forthright, honest, and didn't treat him like an idiot. He doesn't really pay a lot of attention to political gamesmanship, so things like whether Bloomberg bought his way into the party doesn't really matter to him. He voted for McCain in 2008, but Obama in 2012. It was during Obama's administration that he really started to sour on the Republican Party. The more blatantly inaccurate GOP claims became, the more personally insulted he felt. Trump seemed like the culmination of everything he didn't like about the party going into 2016, and so he switched his party affiliation to Dem for the 2016 election and voted Clinton. So now you have a man who feels abandoned by the party that used to represent his center-right views in the Democratic Party. And here comes a candidate that seems straight out of that party he used to identify with. For people like my dad, Bloomberg is the sort of person he'd always have voted for. That isn't to say he'd only vote for Bloomberg, he's essentially in the anyone but Trump camp, but if you were to poll him, he'd pick Bloomberg. I don't know how much of his support comes from people that felt abandoned by the GOP, but from my sole anecdotal example, I can at least kind of see it. You pretty much described my dad. Lifelong Republican, left the party when Sarah Palin arrived on the scene. Moderate Democrat now, loves Bloomberg because he sees Bloomberg as a pragmatic guy. Also, he sees the difference in NYC between Bloomberg and de Blasio and sees this as a litmus test as to why we need to avoid politicians like de Blasio. From y'all's perspective, what's the difference between the two? This? People can bag on Bloomberg and Giuliani all they want, motherfuckers did the impossible. NYC from the late 70s to early 90s was not a nice place. I'm not a Bloomberg supporter, but my dad is, and this is his perspective. He was originally for Biden, but seems to have moved from him only very recently, since his poll numbers dropped. He's an upper middle class baby boomer. He is a forever Democrat, but like many of his generation is probably just left of center. He's never voted Republican in his entire life. He was a fan of the Clintons, Bill more than Hillary. He calls Obama the best president of his lifetime, specifically because of how moderate or centrist he governed, much closer to center than he campaigned as. The other candidate he likes best is Buttigieg, but he thinks he's too young and inexperienced. He despises Trump and wants to nominate the person with the best chance of beating him. He thinks Sanders is too far left and can't win the election. He would absolutely vote for Sanders if he got the nomination. He wholeheartedly believes that for Democrats to win, we need to appeal to moderate Republicans and independents.
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Tell me what you dislike or love about this video, so please comment below and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime a new video is released. This is a WeCrow Media production.